Good afternoon and welcome to our latest Posturite webinar. If you're like me, you're looking out on a beautiful day outside, so we hopefully won't keep you indoors too long. But before you go, we've got a great webinar today. Before I hand over, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. Just want to say that we will be recording this webinar, and so if you do have any technical problems or you need to leave us halfway through, come back and you will find it on the website. If you want to ask any questions, I'll be putting some questions to Claire at the end of the webinar, so please use the box on the right-hand side in the control panel and write your question there, and I'll put as many as I can to her at the end of the session. So really what I need to do now is introduce you to Claire, and we've got Dr. Claire Hardy, who is the co-founder and managing director of Women's Health at Work CIC. And she's going to be talking to us today about menopause and the workplace, something I've been trying to get on the agenda for a while, and I am so glad to be able to introduce you today. So Claire, over to you.
Thank you very much. And I'm absolutely delighted to be here talking to you about the menopause and about menopause in the work context. So I thought I'd introduce myself a little bit for the people who are listening today. So my name's Claire Hardy. I'm an occupational psychologist, and we specialise in looking at people and human behaviour in the workplace to help them become healthy and effective as they possibly can be. And I've spent my professional career working as a consultant, but also largely as an academic researcher to help address our gaps in knowledge and then implement this knowledge in practice through applied consultancy work. But it was around about 7 or 8 years ago, I became particularly interested in women's reproductive health at work, namely premenstrual difficulties and the menopause. And I noticed that there was a lack of research being conducted in these areas, and so I decided to start researching them for myself. And I was lucky enough to be employed as the researcher in the project called Menopause at Work project, which was at King's College London in collaboration with the University of Nottingham. And that was a 3-year project that started in 2015 and ended in January this year. And we were looking at improving the menopausal experience of working women, including carrying out research that tested a non-medical self-help guidebook based on cognitive behavioural therapy for working women who were experiencing particularly problematic menopausal symptoms. The project also developed a training program for workplaces to help raise awareness and knowledge of the menopause in line managers. And I'll be sharing some of the results of some of the studies that we did within that project here today. We've actually got a lot more papers still to be published from that work. So if any of you would like to be kept informed about those, then please do follow us and get in touch. And but I'll give out that information at the end on how you can sign up to those. But most recently, I decided to focus more on getting the research evidence put into practice and helping organisations directly to address their needs around their female staff health. And so I co-founded a not-for-profit organisation called Women's Health at Work, which provides consultancy services to organisations as well as continuing to contribute to research as well. So that's a little bit of background about me. So I will get cracking with the webinar. So I guess the first question is pick at the moment. Well, recent figures by the UK's Office of National Statistics, we have more employed women aged between 50 and 64 than ever before, just over 4.2 million, and these numbers are continuing to increase. Now, it's around about this age that most women will go through their menopause, and for some, it can be a difficult and embarrassing experience at work. And there are a number of reports and guidance documents that are coming out now addressing this issue and noting the importance of considering the menopause within a work context and the importance of supporting staff going through the menopause so that we don't lose them from the workforce. May be familiar with this topic, but there might be some of us listening today that perhaps are not so familiar with it. So what I'd like to do over the next 20 minutes or so is just help us all get a better understanding about what the menopause is, including its symptoms and experiences, as well as the positive aspects of the menopause as well, which is often something completely missed out of discussions on this topic. I'd then like to focus a little bit more on the experiences at work, and I'll talk through what women feel are the most difficult experiences in the work context that they have in relation to their menopause, and what aspects of the working environment tend to make their symptoms more difficult. I'll then summarise evidence from studies that have collected information on what women say they would like from their employers and line managers to help them at work and help them deal with the menopause at work. And then I'll bring all that together and I'll talk through about what we can do to look at the menopause in our own workplaces and how we might be able to help our staff. And I'll provide you with some ideas for how you may wish to address this in your workplace, wherever you are in that particular process. And hopefully we'll have some time for questions and answers. But I'm aware we only have a short time to talk about this today, and it's a huge topic that I could spend a full day talking about. So hopefully if I focus on these particular areas, it will give you a useful preliminary insight into this topic and some ideas of how to help your staff going forward. What is the menopause? So it's a naturally occurring event for every single woman, and it's defined as her last menstrual period, and it usually occurs around about the age of 51 in Western cultures. Now, when we talk about the menopause, often it usually occurs at some point in a woman's age of 50, and this is what we think of as the natural time for the menopause to happen. But there's also something called the early menopause, and that's generally considered when a woman is below the age of 40. We can also get a menopause induced from surgery as well. So having ovaries removed or having a hysterectomy can induce the menopause, but also drug treatment can induce menopausal symptoms as well. For example, for cancer. So women who are taking drugs for breast cancer, they will experience menopausal symptoms, but also men can experience menopausal symptoms from taking cancer treatment drugs as well. Now, with the menopause, we sometimes refer to different phases of the menopause. So the first phase is the premenopausal phase, and that's generally when women are having their regular periods and they're still of reproductive age. But what happens is around about the age of 45 onwards, the body starts changing the levels of reproductive hormones in the body, and that's namely a reduction in estrogen. What happens is, as a result of this, periods start becoming irregular. When I say irregular, I mean in terms of when they happen, how long they happen, also how heavy they are as well. So some women experience very heavy bleeding, very sudden heavy bleeding, known as flooding. Now, when these irregularities start to happen, we say that a woman is in her perimenopausal phase. And it's in this phase that the menopause will happen. So she'll have her last menstrual period. Then when it's been 12 months since this menopause, she's then said to be in her postmenopausal phase. Now, symptoms of the menopause occur during these peri and postmenopausal phases as the body is adjusting to these changes in hormone levels. And this adjustment phase, this transition, lasts on average about 4 years. Once it's complete, symptoms will then stop and go away. But it's kind of important to bear in mind that this process and the experiences of it is different for each woman. Experiences can vary, symptoms aren't necessarily consistent over this transition period as well, and we can't predict when it will happen or how long it will last for either, which can be quite frustrating for women. Now, in terms of the most common symptoms of the menopause are hot flushes and night sweats. So around about 80% of women will experience them at some point during their menopause, and they can be accompanied by mood and sleep disturbances as well. Now, hot flushes, or hot flashes if you're in the US, and night sweats, they're the same thing. So night sweats just happen when you're asleep, but they're the same thing as hot flashes, which happen during the day. And they're described as sudden feelings of heat, often starting in the chest, that raise up the neck to the face. Sometimes the skin might become red on the face, and also perspiration will happen as well. The body can sometimes start shivering as well as the body temperature is attempting to return to normal. These can last for a few seconds, they can last for up to an hour. It's really different for each woman. and they're believed to occur because of a rate of change in estrogen in the body that affects its temperature regulating mechanism. So essentially, a woman will start sweating sooner than she normally would, and she'll start shivering sooner than she normally would. Now, there's lots of discussions in the media which often portray the menopause as a horrible, debilitating experience, but that's not the case for everybody. So the experiences are highly variable. Some women don't get anything, some do, maybe sporadically. Most women will experience some symptoms, but not necessarily in a problematic way. However, around about a third of women will find them particularly bothersome and interfere with their normal functioning, which usually results in them seeking help from a health professional. But there are very positive things to come from the menopause as well, and some women see the menopause as a positive experience. For example, not having to deal with periods every month or worrying about contraception and getting pregnant. Also, women talk about the menopause as a time for them to focus on themselves, and they talk about experiencing some personal growth because of that, and they can concentrate on the things that they've wanted to do for a long time but never felt able to do that, perhaps because of motherhood, for example. And I think these positive aspects are important because we know from psychological research that perceptions and beliefs about the menopause are related to a woman's experience of symptoms. So the more negative the belief, the more problematic symptoms are typically experienced, and vice versa. So by having this more accurate and a balanced view of the menopause, including the positive aspects, and sharing those with other people, including our staff, is quite important because it will potentially affect how a woman or our staff will experience the symptoms and interpret them. Of almost 900 women in the UK, carried out and published by Professor Amanda Griffiths and colleagues from the University of Nottingham. And they asked peri and postmenopausal women what symptoms they attributed to the menopause as being the most difficult at work. And what they found was that the most difficult things that women said was that they had poor concentration, poor memory, and they felt tired. This was closely followed by low mood and low confidence as well. Now, if we think that if women are waking up in the night, getting a disrupted night's sleep, it's perhaps understandable that they might feel tired and find concentrating at work more difficult. And if they feel anxious about this, then again, it's quite understandable that their mood may be affected as well. Work situations make their hot flushes most difficult to deal with. And we can see the range of answers here. The top two answers were that being in hot, unventilated working environments and having formal meetings or having to do presentations were the most difficult situations at work with regards to women experiencing hot flushes at work. It highlighted that women were not telling their employers that they may be having difficulties or fear they may not be performing as normal due to their menopause. So it was almost 70% of women said they have not or they would not disclose their menopausal difficulties to their line manager. And this includes the reasons for absence as well. So although only around 12% of women in this study had taken a day off work because of their menopause, it was over 40% didn't actually give the real reason for their absence. Now, this kind of lack of disclosure, women often said was because they had a male line manager or a younger line manager, whether that be male or female, for whom they felt potentially would not understand or sympathise with their situation or give a positive response and perhaps the support they need. Now, this is important because if employees and line managers don't know of any problems or difficulties with their staff, then they won't know that they need to do anything differently or what can be done to help. Together findings from a number of studies and a literature review of UK guidance documents on addressing menopause in the workplace that we carried out in the project. And I wanted to highlight kind of 4 key recommendations. So firstly, the most consistently requested recommendation is the importance of raising awareness of the menopause and how it can affect women, including the impact of the working environment on women at work, especially the physical aspects of the working environment. So what women said was important that employers and line managers really need to have better awareness about the menopause, because in order to begin to understand that some staff may need help and may need possible adjustments at work, they need to have awareness of what it is and how it might be affecting women. But what's also been suggested is that raising awareness and helping women themselves have a better awareness of what they might be going through, and offering information about the menopause from their workplaces to these women is recommended as well. So this could be information about the menopause, what they might experience, how they can help themselves, including coping strategies that have been used by women whilst at work, advice as well on how to broach the subject at work if women do need some extra support. All of these have been noted as useful and desirable for workplaces to provide. Now, included in this is the importance of having awareness of all staff. So if all staff have some knowledge and awareness, it's potentially beneficial, as that it might help foster conversations and help women feel more supported at work and more able to ask for help if they need it. Now, I think this is what's also useful to bear in mind in relation to this, is that whilst the menopause is something that relates to the female reproductive system, many men will have partners going through the menopause, or perhaps have female colleagues or staff at work which they may have to deal with or talk to about their menopause. So making sure that all staff have this knowledge, not just women and line managers, is important. So the next recommendation is having supportive policies and practices. Now, this could be things like having accommodating sickness absence and flexible working to allow women to have doctor's appointments and more breaks, for example, without being penalised for doing that. Offering training and support like awareness raising events, or even sometimes giving more control or assistance to staff in relation to the physical aspects of the working environment. For example, providing desk fans to women who may feel that perhaps their office is too hot for them. Now, these don't necessarily have to be expensive to carry out, or nor do the adjustments at work have to be expensive either, such as allowing a woman to just move her desk to a window that can be opened, for example. But having policies and supportive practices in place can be a useful way to help these women and to guide staff on how they can help, as well as creating a menopause-friendly or a women's health-friendly work culture. So the culture at work is very important to how things are done and how we feel at work, and how open we can be in talking about any problems that we have. So the more we can address and talk about these kinds of topics in a non-judgmental way or a critical way at work, then hopefully the more we can prevent anyone being affected by these experiences and not getting the help and support they need at work because they feel they can't talk about it, or that they shouldn't talk about it. So I guess this is quite similar to the movements that have been created around talking about mental health in the workplace. So staff similarly need to feel that they can broach topics like the menopause at work, and that they know that staff, and well, what should happen is that staff should be okay in responding to these discussions as well. So lastly, what I wanted to say is that it's important that whatever we do, and the information that we share with staff is based on evidence and not just what's been Googled, which often is very, very scaremongering. So it's important that as professionals, we help provide a balanced and an accurate understanding and perspective of the menopause without being overly negative or unhelpful. And I hope, hopefully, that this webinar has helped somewhat with this. So in terms of what we can do, well, wherever you are in the process, you might have already started doing something around the menopause at work, you may not have done, but there's always something that can be done. And I think it's a useful this slide's quite useful to think about the process that you might want to think about and take if you are going to tackle the menopause in the workplace. So I think firstly, it's important to think about and carry out an initial needs assessment. So what's happening right now in your organisation? How many female staff do you have that might be going through the menopause? Is there anything that's currently being provided by your workplace? Also, is there anything that's wanted, or is anyone actually saying that they need something at work? And once we've done that and we have an understanding about what's happening right now, we then can develop an action plan and develop one that's realistic to your workplace as well. So understanding what resources you have and what perhaps the short-term and long-term goals that you may have in addressing your organisation's needs and wants around the menopause. And then, of course, it comes to implementing this action plan. So that could be running workshops for staff, providing support groups, producing guidance and policy documents, for example. And whilst doing this, of course, it's really useful to gather the data to monitor and to understand how well the action plan is being implemented and whether any changes are needed to overcome any barriers you might be facing in delivering these activities effectively. Now, if you're listening and you feel like you need help in doing this in your organisation, please do get in touch and we'll be happy to help. This is something we're very passionate about. So do feel free to get in touch and ask for our help if you need it. Organisations to help staff. You can also get involved in initiatives as well that help provide more insight into these topics and address our knowledge gaps, such as being involved in research projects. So we have a number of projects that we're working on. So for example, one in particular we're looking to move forward with right now is looking at understanding a range of women's reproductive health issues within the work context, including the menopause, but also things like premenstrual difficulties, endometriosis, polycystic ovary syndrome, heavy menstrual bleeding, fertility issues. So topics that really have not been examined in great depth, yet many women might be experiencing difficulties. So we're really keen to hear from organisations who may be interested in doing work like this in their organisations. Again, please do get in touch if this is something that interests you and you'd like to talk more about that. But what we can also do is get involved in information sharing and knowledge sharing too. So we share information and research as they're published. For example, we produce infographics to summarise research and share the results and findings in a little more of a easy and digestible way than an academic paper, which all of us can't even have access to, let alone understand sometimes. So we like to produce these infographics and share them on Twitter and LinkedIn. So if you're interested in getting these and hopefully sharing the knowledge with others, please do sign up to get these. They're completely free, and I'll give you details for that on the next slide. But I think being involved in this information sharing and knowledge sharing is important because it helps keep these topics in our consciousness and helps us be mindful of them, which hopefully in turn might help instigate discussions about these taboo issues, which again hopefully will stop them being topics that we can't or we don't want to talk about at work because perhaps we feel embarrassed or perhaps we feel we shouldn't talk about these topics at work. But if we do talk about them, then hopefully it might let others feel more supported and give them potentially the courage to actually ask for help if they do actually feel like they need extra help and support at work. So a whirlwind tour, that's actually all we've got time for, I'm afraid. So really quickly, just thank you for joining, and I hope it's been informative and useful for you, albeit a very quick talk. If you've got any questions after today, do feel free to email me. That's my email address. If you want to be kept informed about our new research studies that are coming out, the infographics that we share, and anything else we're doing with the not-for-profit organisation, that's our Twitter account there, our LinkedIn profile, and our website's there too. So I guess now we are moving on to the Q&A session. So Catherine, it's back to you.
Yes, Claire, thank you so much for that. That was really helpful. I know we did have a few sound issues when we were changing slides, but I hope everybody was able to hear what they needed to do. But as I say, you've provided some details. So if they have any questions, hopefully people will get in touch. Got a couple of questions coming through, and I think that the first one really is talking around whether there are any legal requirements, particularly the Equality Act, that the menopause and dealing with menopause really comes under. So any legal requirements to deal with these issues within the workplace?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we carried out a review of UK guidance documents. So these were documents from trade unions and professional bodies about how to tackle menopause in the workplace. And the aspect of the legal issues and responsibilities came up frequently in those guidance documents. And And yeah, and generally, so there's two kind of main areas. So you mentioned one, the Equalities Act. So that arguably, according to these guidance documents, is something that employers should be aware of, because two of the protected characteristics actually reflect menopause. So that's gender and age. So you've got older working women, and what kind of under that act would kind of suggest is that it's important to make sure that the workplace is kind of helping older working women who may be having any difficulties at work, and provide any adjustments and support that they feel they need. And if they don't do that, then potentially it's seen as discrimination. But linked to that, very closely linked to that, is just health and safety at work as well. So guidance documents were discussing the importance that workplaces should not be making any health condition or any aspect of health worse. And it's important that workplaces have risk assessments to make sure that they are not doing this, and should anything need to be adjusted, then they will provide it where they can. So that's a really good question. So yes, potentially there are legal issues for not addressing menopause in the workplace.
And yes, I mean, I think it's also just the productivity from a personal point of view. I think it's also good. So thank you. This is another very interesting one. Have a message saying we have a global workforce, including people working in the UK. Obviously, this presentation was very much for Western cultures. Are there any comments you want to make about working with different cultures, or any suggestions about how we could communicate effectively?
Yeah, that's a good one as well. So a lot of what I spoke about today, including the legal issues, is to do with tackling, I guess, menopause in the workplace in the UK. And a lot of the research actually has come from the UK. Believe it or not, we're actually quite progressive when it comes to dealing with menopause in the workplace. It seems to be less of an issue. Well, not less of an issue, but it seems to have less interest in other countries. I suspect that will soon change. But the experiences of the menopause can be different in different cultures as well. And I think if you're thinking about your global workforce and how to actually help women from different countries and cultures, again, I'd probably go back to that process of if you are going to do something, think about doing an initial needs assessment. So what is actually happening in your workplace or in different countries at the time, when you do look at that, and what else needs to be done? What are women saying that they need to be done? Because in some cultures, women don't want to talk about it. It seems in the West, it's becoming more and more of an area that is discussed, which is great. But there are countries and cultures where it is still very, very sensitive. So wherever you do, whichever country you do work with, I think be very aware of the cultural sensitivities, because some cultures are not as progressive of what we are here in the West. So I can't give any specific recommendations because it does vary a lot. But if you have anything specific that you'd like to ask me, by all means, drop me an email and I'll see if I can provide any more information there.
Thank you, Claire. Do you know, we have a lot of people writing in actually just supporting the need to make sure this is an open discussion, and are really grateful that we're talking about it today. So there's a lot of positive comments coming in as well as questions. We've got another question here saying, should workshops be run by medical professionals, do you think? Or do you think there's a role for others in this?
It very much depends. So it depends what the workshop is. If you're doing a workshop, for example, and you're looking to provide information about the menopause and I guess potential methods of managing symptoms as well. So I'm thinking HRT. And obviously cognitive behavioral therapy and things like that as well. It's not necessarily important for it to be a medical professional, but just someone who is a health professional and has adequate training and knowledge. So some expertise is definitely needed. But there are other workshops as well. So I would always say, if you're running a workshop, ideally it's going to be someone who is expert and who's got knowledge and awareness and skills of working in the area. As well as actually knowing the evidence as well. And so it's quite useful if someone has at least some awareness or skills in dealing with academic literature as well, because I think sometimes what can happen is people, and I've seen that sometimes people can pick up information from the internet and things, and they can maybe download academic papers but not necessarily understand them correctly, and so the information that's given across is not necessarily entirely correct, or it's very heavy towards the negative side, which again isn't very helpful as well. So kind of back to the question, should it be run by a medical professional? No, I don't think it should be. I think it very much depends on what the workshop is. But if it is going to include information about treatments, then make sure that it's someone who is at least a health professional and qualified to talk about it.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Now, one last question, although I think this one's going to be quite a difficult one, so we'll see where we go. How can one spot signs of stress related to menopause compared to maybe stress from other causes? Have you any tips or thoughts on that, or do you think it's really too wide to be able to comment on?
I think that is incredibly difficult, because it's very hard to pull apart stress in its, stress is a very broad area, and I think stress caused by the menopause, and it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because if you're feeling anxious at work, or having difficulties concentrating, things like that, you may feel more pressured. And so you may feel more stressed. It's not necessarily that because you're going through hormonal changes that you're experiencing stress, but it could be just, having to deal with these extra things and having to be mindful that, you may suddenly get a heavy period that you need to go to the toilet, or if you're doing a presentation, you might just be mindful that, oh, I'm sweating, what are people thinking? And that can be quite a stressful thing to go through. But in terms of the difference between stress generally and stress related to menopause specifically, I think I would say it's probably all of the same thing. I think if you're going to look at stress and investigate stress and try and understand it, then gathering that information, the menopause might come out, but it could be other things as well. How we experience things at work, as well as stress at work, very much dependent on our own resources and also what's going on in the working environment as well. Funnily enough, we've done some research into this, and we've just had a paper published last week or the week before, I think it was, which is looking at stress and the menopause, well, stress and mid-age women as well. So I can provide the link of that if you'd like me to share that with you.
Oh, that'd be very helpful, Claire. Thank you. I think we've run out of time, and we will put any questions to Claire, and we will put any answers on the website. Just one sort of final comment. Again, I've drawn together a few of the other questions and statements come through. Just really endorsing how important it is to open these discussions. And as somebody pointed out, because actually it might be your manager who is struggling, and that's a very difficult thing if it's not open and being discussed, isn't it? So I think very interesting one. Now, can I just reiterate to everyone that the presentation is going to be on our website. I've got a couple of people asking for sort of copies of the presentation. What obviously I'll discuss with Claire afterwards as to what we can do with that. So we'll address that. I've also had somebody asking if they would like a certificate of attendance. So again, if they could, well, we'll deal with that. We got a note of that, and so we'll deal with that coming through. So really, Claire, I'd just like to thank you so much for your time today and that information. And I really hope this is just another step in allowing us all to talk a little bit more openly, perhaps not just about the menopause, but about other issues that currently have just been hidden that affect us all at work. So thank you so much. And just thank you everyone for listening to us today. And please enjoy this fabulous weekend. I think it's ahead of us. Enjoy the sunshine and the spring. And I look forward to speaking to you all soon. So with that, thank you very much, Claire. Thank you for everyone listening, and goodbye.